So I'm going to introduce our speakers for the next session here. I'd like to begin with Scott Rouse. Scott believes that while the leap to net zero is necessary, simple incremental measures can eliminate huge amounts of CO2 in the meantime. As a managing partner for Energy at Work, Scott's focus is helping customers achieve sustainable results by improving their triple bottom line, economic prosperity, environmental performance, and social responsibility. Scott is a professional engineer, certified energy manager, and sustainable development professional. With the Association of Energy Engineers, he's an advisor for the Industrial Energy Technology Conference, as well as a member of the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers. As an IEEE Distinguished Lecturer, Scott is presented in South America, Singapore, Australia, and South Africa, and as a member of BOMA, Toronto Energy and Environmental Committee, and a founding chair of the Canadian Energy Managers Network, Scott continues to be an active energy efficiency advocate for sustainable customer benefits. Scott's international recognition was achieved by developing practical solutions as well as the experience gained by implementing the energy efficiency program that won the Canadian and the US EPA's Climate Protection Award. Our second speaker will be Robin Hutchison, the president of Arborist Consulting. Engineering the Ottawa Carbon Neutral District, holistic approaches to energy strategies and technologies deliver a net zero carbon emissions outcome will be the topic of his discussion. Robin is a 30-year veteran of the design, construction, and facilities management fields and an electrical energy engineer. He's the president of Arborist Consulting, a performance engineering practice located in Ottawa. Robin has been working with Sustainable Buildings Canada since 2005 and is currently an active board member. He's led Savings by Design integrated workshops for the past 4 years in the Ottawa area, and he's taken a lead position in the emerging area of net zero buildings. Robin spent the last 15 years working exclusively on energy efficiency, green building, and renewable energy projects, and is recognized as an industry innovator and a trusted resource in the area of energy and buildings. Robin has been involved in advancing environmental issues since the 1980s and is a climate leader with Al Gore's Climate Reality Project. So to kick things off, I'd like to ask Scott Rouse to come up and get things rolling.
Thanks very much, Larry. Well, first off, I'd like to say thank you. Thanks for allowing me to share my story with you on this. I think it's an exciting topic. There we go. Yeah, so what I'm going to be talking about is net zero, but the focus is really on, is it real? What does it mean to, what does it mean to me? I'd like to share that. How much we need partnerships and bringing people together. I'll talk a little bit about that. My focus really is on existing buildings, because that's where we spend all our time. I was really inspired by the opening remarks this morning, because I think there's a lot of things in the new construction that we can take into existing buildings, and I was pleased to see that we're not tearing them all down, but reimagining. And I hope that I leave you with something that you take away. Tom was very clear. I spoke in Ottawa. Apparently he didn't like my talk, so he wanted to make sure that I had something to give you to take away. So hopefully I do that this time. So net zero, when I first heard about it, I said, is this another big, hairy, audacious goal that we're going to shoot for, or is it just a pipe dream? And I've kind of come to the realization that the pipe dream is really the status quo. We cannot continue doing what we're doing. We really do need to rethink what we're all about. And I think existing buildings has a real opportunity. And one of the themes that I've learned from my customers is we're doing it because it's the right thing to do. So in terms of looking at how we're going to make this happen, for some reason my pictures aren't showing up. But there's two pictures. One's Mohawk College. I think we have a gentleman from Mohawk. Sorry your picture didn't show up. I don't know why. But it's the idea was to show two buildings that, no, it didn't work that way. They had two buildings that existing buildings are hitting net zero. So I think there's a real good opportunity. It's telling us we can do it. Now, with existing buildings, it's a much greater challenge, I admit that. But I believe through partnerships, and partnerships, we hear a lot about architects, engineers, et cetera, but I think the partnerships has to extend to a larger community. We need to bring in the owners, the shareholders, the property management companies. Tenants and occupants are really important. Government, direction, leadership, utilities. We need them to practice. Enbridge is a good example, and of course energy management specialists, but we all have a shared responsibility in hitting these targets, and I think that's another theme I'd like to leave with you. We all leave this room with a certain responsibility to do what we can in our role. So just a little bit about our experience. We're helping somewhere in the order of 30 million square feet of commercial office buildings. What surprised me, BOMA, I don't know how many people are familiar with BOMA, but it's the Building Owner Management Association. And BOMA Canada does an annual review, and they look at what is the average energy intensity of the buildings. And I always figured that BOMA was up here. You know, if you're a BOMA building and you report on your energy, you're going to be somewhere up here. But the BOMA average is only 27 equivalent kilowatt hours per square foot. And what struck me is, why aren't we using these numbers? Why don't we talk about what a building is actually performing instead of talking about a 20% reduction, 30% reduction? In our database, we're averaging around 20 equivalent kilowatt hours. There's an example here of a 1983 building that's hitting 14. So is net zero that hard to achieve? Certainly we have a long way to go, but I think when I look at the top end, there's a lot of opportunity to reduce our carbon in existing buildings, and I think that's what we should be looking at as well. So why aren't we doing it? Well, there's a whole lot of challenges. One of the challenges, when I look at this device, I'm older than a lot of people here, I'm still amazed at what it can do and how far it's come along. But when I look at the electricity grid, I'll be honest with you, I'm very disappointed. I don't see a lot of change from what the electricity grid is doing today versus what it did 100 years ago. I don't see the innovation that we've seen in telecommunication. Why that's happening, there's a good book if you're interested. It's non-technical, so you don't have to, it's called The Grid. And she talks about a lot of the problems and issues. And we really do need the electricity sector to get on side if we're going to hit net zero. So our experience on this whole net zero is really deja vu. We've heard it before. Why aren't we moving ahead? There's a lot of 20 by 15 was a big activity in GTA. We've got oodles of stories on net zero is doable, we can do it, we should be able to do it. But why isn't it happening? Why aren't we seeing more progress? Well, it seems that whenever I get asked that question, they're looking for a silver bullet, saying, okay, what do we need to fix so we can get moving on? In my opinion, there is no silver bullet. We've identified over 30 barriers, and these aren't superficial barriers. These are real barriers to people from moving forward. There were so many of them, we just grouped them into the 6 A's, accountability, affordability, etc. The one that I have the most trouble with is apathy. How do you get people motivated to move forward? We heard about the release of what's happening with climate change. I have a little cartoon on my desk which says Mother Nature looking down on the planet saying, what do I have to do to get your attention? I don't know how to motivate, but we certainly do need to rally the troops. So the apathy one is no one seems to care. Why should I care? Whoops. Well, I think we should bother. I think there's a whole bunch of reasons, but both plus and minus. Talk about utility costs. I think we've heard enough about that. A climate response. I think we have responsibility to ourselves to do something. One of the positive things that I see coming out in Ontario is the energy and water reporting. It's about time we know what our building's performance is. So I think that's a great thing. I hope it doesn't get cut. Look at all the energy efficiency benefits, and I'm not talking about reduced costs and climate. I'm also talking about improved comfort. Dave Katz and I worked for Ontario Hydro, and I remember one day walking into the boardroom, and the president of Ontario Hydro said, I don't know, the energy efficiency guy must have been here. It's lit, it's poorly lit, it's crappy. And I said to him, well, the energy efficiency guy is here. If he was here first, your lighting would be soft, it would be bright, you'd be a lot more comfortable, and it would be efficient. A good lighting design is really hard to see. And then most important is this theme, it's the right thing to do. And I know I'm singing to the choir, but sorry about that. Okay, so example of wasteful practices. The picture on the left is a washroom, really very too hot, very uncomfortable. What's the solution? Open the window. You know, let all that conditioned air just go out the window. The middle graph is interesting. This is two buildings taken on the same day. The building on the top, you can kind of pick out when the occupied hours are because they're heating the building when people are there. Pretty brilliant, right? If you look at the bottom graph, this is a similar building, but they're running, the gas is essentially being used 24/7. Systems are just left on whether people are there or not there. I've been really encouraged. I got good news. Enbridge is looking to do a study, and I thank Mary for that. And we're hoping to quantify and demonstrate to others that, you know, just because you have a good R squared and the correlation between energy and temperature, electricity or gas use and temperature, doesn't necessarily mean you have an efficient building. And then finally the picture on the right, I had to laugh at this one because the sign said, "Help us conserve, use the revolving doors." Meanwhile, they have a negative pressure in the lobby and they got air blowing in. So should you bother, you know, is there a business case to be made? There really is, and we call the triple bottom line business case. And I just want to talk about two portions for existing buildings. One is creating greater asset value, and you know, the keynote speaker talking about imagine, and I've got an example of that. And that's really where you take an asset that's worth 100,000, and you can revisualize it, repopulate it, it becomes 200,000. 365 Bloor East, if you ever get an opportunity, has done that, and they'll get some information. But secondly, for even a typical building, by investing in energy efficiency, improving performance, etc., when you look at the key metrics that a commercial building holds high, rents, occupancy rates, tenant renewals, etc., a green building is doing much better. So there's another reason to do it. 365 Bloor, it's at the corner of Sherbourne and Bloor Street on the south side. This was a vision by Green Wind that they wanted to revitalize this building, reimagine it if you like. And not only did they improve their building, they have actually generated more excitement in the Bloor Sherbourne area. We've got information on it if you're interested. So the tough part is get started. How do we move forward? Well, again, I think we do need that top level support. There's a lot of tactics and tools that are available, the energy audit, real-time monitoring, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. The Energy Management Action Plan is very important because I talked about the 30 barriers. Overcoming these barriers, really, they're easy to break individually, but if we work collectively together, it's much harder to break, and that's where the whole team comes together. And I really like the analogy of the sticks. I used to do this with my children. You know, you put 3 sticks together and you ask them to break it, it becomes hard. And that's what we need to do with the partnerships. We need to come together and work together. So, is it easy? It's not easy, but we do have the tools today when we look at the profiles of buildings, we look at where the opportunities, we've come up with the solutions. They're very doable, and I'll give some examples of that. This one in particular is probably one of my favorite. It drove me crazy for about 3 years because there was 2 buildings. I looked at the gas consumption of both buildings, and I knew something was weird. I couldn't put my finger on it, and I couldn't prove to the property manager that we should invest. I got a whole bunch of these excuses that I talk about. So finally we were able to put real-time monitoring on both buildings, and we looked at the gas consumption. The building on the left, you can notice the blue line and the red line. The blue line is the amount of gas the building's using. The red line is the heating degree day. The higher the red line, the colder it is. So when you look in the building on the left, you can pick out a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Building's not occupied, not using as much gas, makes sense. Higher blue lines when a higher red line, makes sense. The building on the right, we couldn't tell. We couldn't tell on a Saturday, Sunday. It was just basically systems are on 24/7. Didn't matter what the temperature was. This is not unusual. We've seen this a lot of times. We're able to do an existing building commissioning. Thanks to Enbridge support, they verified that the savings were real, and the client was able to get an incentive based on the savings. This one was a surprise to me. We all know VFDs work and they should be implemented where you can. They're a proven technology, but in this case we put the VFDs in and we actually got a surprisingly high demand savings, which meant that the motors that were put in were way oversized. And so we expected to see a kWh savings. We actually got a demand savings. And that's another point when we're looking at systems. What are they doing? How are they working? Some of the tools, I think everybody is familiar with benchmarking, so I'm not going to dwell on that. I think it is important, and I applaud the City of Toronto and the province for putting reporting in place. This is a great tool. It's a QSUM analysis. This is a building on University we started working with. If you look at the graph on the left, it's showing the electricity, and you can see how flat the consumption is and how consistent. A new operating team took over the building, and the use just dropped without capital. I think this is, if you're in the commercial building sector and you're in property management, being able to make improvements without capital is a big deal. And so they had an avoided cost. What inspired me on this particular project is not only they did it with electricity, the graphs on the right are showing natural gas and water, and this operating team killed all three utilities without affecting tenant comfort. I think we've got a lot of examples like that. It is complicated. We got a lot of complicated systems. We got a lot of information, but we have smart people. We talk about the young people coming into the workforce. We got a highly educated group. I'm always amazed at their ability to use the technology, to do the analytics, create pivot tables. So I think we've got we can turn the into useful information and come up with good solutions. Can we achieve net zero? I like to think it's possible, but it's definitely it's not going to happen unless we can all come together. And I think we all have a responsibility to bring all this together. So this is one of my favorite slides. I use this. I've been using this for quite a while, but I started to add a few things to the bottom of it. We need to explore, we need to challenge, we need to ask the questions. Common one is, why are the lights left on? Energy and Work sponsors the Earth Hour Challenge with BOMA, and the purpose is to really look at why are we leaving the lights on, and when you look at a picture of the city, all that light pollution, it doesn't make sense. Looking at the building automation system, what's it telling you? Why is there conflicts? This one was an interesting one. Maintaining CO2 levels at 600 ppm. That means that you're bringing in a lot of outside air and conditioning that air for what reason? To maintain 600 ppm? My favorite question is really just an open-ended. Why are we doing it that way? And all these things are really looking below the surface. But as we explore, we find new opportunities. So a great example of this was, it's actually the building that I rent. We're a tenant in the space. It's called Berkeley Castle. It's near the St. Lawrence Market. Historic building, the management team, very engaged, very involved. They're very caring about it. And their energy consumption was fairly consistent. They were better than the BOMA average, which surprised me. We were able to do an energy audit. We kicked off an energy management plan. We've got 11% reduction without capital the first year. The news was so good that we were able to encourage them to put a building automation system in to control the rooftop units. So they did spend capital about somewhere in the order of less than 100,000. We're expecting to have a 7-month payback. And the reason I included that graph on the bottom left is all the numbers are coming off the electric bill. So these aren't calculated numbers, they're actually showing up. We have to be vigilant if we're going to be doing this. This is a great graph from the ACEEE. When I originally started getting into this game, I had a 4-year project. And after the second year, we hit our 4-year target. And I went to my boss and I said, this is not a project. With all the innovation, with all the new technologies, this is a process that we need to put in place. And I would encourage every organization to look at it that way. Whatever we do today, something's going to be better tomorrow. Famous quote, we've invented everything that could be invented in 1947. We know that's wrong. There's always going to be some more exciting things happening. So, going back to Tom, he said, make this important to our delegates, give them something specific to take away. So, I thought of 3 things. If you want to do something, set something up, what the first steps are. Second one is how do you operationalize it, call to action. And the third one is, I call it feeding the fire. If you don't continue to feed a fire, the fire goes out. And that's a real challenge. So first one is top management support. If you want to set up a program, you definitely have to get top management support. It's not hard to do. What is hard is collecting the information and putting it in a framework that they can understand. We use the triple bottom line, but we're also introducing risk management. It's a great strategy. And you want to customize your plan for your operation. And again, once you get to know the people and you bring everybody together, putting real-time monitoring, I think, is a no-brainer. I don't know why every building doesn't have the ability to see what they're using at any point in time. And then, of course, benchmark it. Why don't we start asking ourselves, we buy a new car, we want to know what the mileage is. Why, when we have a building, we don't know what the mileage of that building is? I don't get it. Second one is operationalize, this call to action. I think a partnership between the accounting people and operations is sadly lacking. A lot of operators never see an electricity bill. They have no idea what the building's using, what the costs are, when they're using it, etc. We can track monthly consumption, and if we can move from, especially for existing buildings, from a reactive to a proactive model, I think we'll be further off. And there's a lot of rewards in doing that. The energy and water reporting, why be surprised that there's something coming down the pipe? We know what's here. We know we're going to have to report buildings over 100,000 square feet. Why not get prepared now? You'll be in a super position. Some of the more progressive buildings are also now taking care of Energy Star certification. It's been around the States for quite a while. It was introduced in February, I believe, this year, or April. So now you can actually get your building Energy Star certified, and I think that's a really cool thing. Third one is to feed the fire for continuous improvement. It's tough. I'll be honest with you. When you get a program going, how do you maintain that excitement? You hit the targets first year, second year, how do you do it? I think what you do is you try and create this excitement, and you can do it in a lot of ways. Recognition is a good one, awards, that's always popular. Getting training materials together. Peer reviews work really well, and we'll do building tours, so there's a bunch of different ways. We hear the word engagement a lot. I'm almost sick of that word. I think Mike Singleton told me not to use it. Just because engagement has become too blasé. Really what we need is listening. We need to be able to hear where the problems are, where the opportunities are. And it's a lost art. Support operations. Too often operations are told you got to do better. The beatings are going to continue until we see improvements. Why don't we help remove their barriers? Give them the real-time monitoring. Do the reports for them. Make it so that they feel more rewarded. I think there's a lot of areas we can do in that. The bottom line is, as I mentioned, with 33 barriers, there's an awful lot of reasons not to do anything. So if you're ever short of finding how can I stop a program, feel free to give me a shout. I've heard, I think, all of them. So Tom also asked me what to expect if you're going out asking for help. What you should be looking for from the help you get. Well, I think the first one is whoever you get the help, they should be able to quantify the benefits to you clearly and articulate it for your organization. I use Jerry Maguire, show me the money, but it's more than that. It's the economic, it's the environment, it's the social responsibility. You need to communicate it. Holding up the mirror is a term that I've used a lot, and it's really to get honest feedback. If your building is not performing the way it should be, you want somebody to tell you that. You don't want somebody to make it a PR exercise. Greenwash kills, and it may not kill initially, but it will catch up with you. So I think Netzero support is growing. I got a couple of slides here. I think the deck is going to be available, so I'm going to go over these fairly quickly. But BOMA Canada this year, with the support of Enercan, had their first Netzero awards. They announced them last week in Calgary. The winner of the most improved was 4711 Young. Very good for them. A lot of other programs going up, including Sustainable Building Canada. A lot of tools are available. Enercan, I've got to give them credit for the existing building commissioning. I think the 4-phase approach makes a lot of sense. We see it a lot in Europe, and it's been in Canada for a while, but I think it's still not thoroughly understood. I've got some other tools here as well. The BOMA Canada Netzero Challenge, I think, is going to be something that's going to be occurring going forward. A short comment. I talk about the federal program, but I think a lot of people here are from Ontario. For those that aren't, I apologize. But just a little commercial on the conservation demand management. We call it CDM. They dodged the bill at September 20th, a couple of weeks ago, and it was happened when the Green Energy Act was cancelled. Fortunately, CDM, energy water reporting, a few other things were transferred from the Green Energy Act into something called the Electricity Act. And obviously Doug Ford wants to see a lot of changes. Some of those changes I support him on. Cutting our electricity rates is important. The global adjustment cost is over $1 billion a month. Getting your head around spending $1 billion a month is scary. Cutting CDM will reduce that a little bit, but to my way of thinking, it's not the right solution. I think we have to really look at the global adjustment, find out where the real costs are, which is generation, and find out what is contributing to those costs, and that's where we need to make the cut, not conservation. That's my opinion. You may have another opinion. Your opinion is, the government does want to hear from you. There's a website if anybody's interested. Feedback is encouraged by October 21st this year. So I would encourage you, if you do have an opinion on it, like I said, we walk out that door, we all have a certain amount of responsibility, and this is your opportunity to get your voice heard. So that commercial's over. Okay, second last word. I always save the last word for customers because I think they're the most important. What I feel it would make a big difference is if we actually started getting a lot more specific around what buildings are actually doing. I think transparency would be a huge step. So, ask yourself, what is your building's energy performance? Is it above 27? Is it below 27? I think we start having that conversation. I think it's going to start moving people. And I think the business case can be made to start paying ourselves. Why do we continue to pay utilities? We're stuck with the rates. We're not stuck with the consumption. I think there's enough opportunities to reduce the consumption that your total cost will go down. So, last word, 4711 Young, winner of the most improved Netzero Challenge. How did they do it? Number one, vision. Menkes is committed to making improvements. They've done some terrific things. They've got an energy management action plan in place, real-time monitoring. They're looking at new thinking. I love the quote from the operator, James. We were showing the real-time monitoring. We had a question. We said, "What's happened here, James?" He goes, "I don't know, but I'll look into it." What a great response to have an operator actually care enough. And I know James from past experience, he will look into it. He will find out what the issue is. 43 Bay. I know you're going on that walking tour. If I'd known earlier, I would have suggested you include that. It's just down the street. If any of you are interested in existing buildings, 43 Bay is an example to a lot of people. They've won multiple awards. They've had real-time monitoring. I think they're one of the first commercial buildings we put real-time monitoring in. They did enter into the Netzero Challenge Award. In fact, they participated in the Netzero Challenge Award in December last year in order to help beta and get the whole Netzero Challenge Award off the ground. You can see all the awards they've won. Their BOMA Platinum, their LEED Platinum, their BOMA 360. They pretty well have consistently, year over year over year, made all these achievements. So I asked Norman Shansky, who's the property operations manager, I said, why do you still bother? You know, you've done all this, your energy performance is incredible, they've got an energy star score of 95, why don't you sit back and relax? And Norm's response, well, it's the right thing to do, and they continue to do that. So with that, I said they're the last word. I think I got a minute left if I can take a question. I want to use my full 30 minutes. Oh, is that right? No questions. But I am going to be around if anybody does have any questions, despite what Larry says. You're welcome to ask them later on. And again, thank you for your attention. I'd like to turn it over to Robin now.